Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine Om Aim Swami Vivekanandaya Namaha Om Aim Swami Vivekanandaya Namaha Namo Namaha. Namaskarams to all of you. In the name of Swami Vivekananda, our great ideal and the Lord of our heart, and the master guide for Love India Forum, and welcome you all to this wonderful forum called Love India, conducted by Vivekananda Vedic Vision, Kodungalur, under the able and loving leadership of Dr. Lakshmi Kumari and her colleagues. So last few Saturdays, we have taken this opportunity to discuss about Swami Vivekananda's life incidents, in a way depicting some of the messages hidden in the incidents to show how we get related to different aspects of our life, and how these relations lend a touch, and in each occasion the touch varies and it has got its own fragrance. Each fragrance is unique, like the different fragrance of different flowers. Each flower has got its own fragrance and beautiful smell. So each of these touch has got its own fragrance and wonderful smell. So the first touch that Swami Vivekananda got was the transcendental touch, the touch of the Sachidananda, the one without a second, which imparted from the very beginning the idea of oneness in the very mind and heart and in the entire personality of Swami Vivekananda. And we saw how this idea of oneness indirectly radiated through all the sayings of Swami Vivekananda, and also through the entire personality and the life incidents of Swami Vivekananda, where we find Swamiji was constantly in union, not only with God, but with human beings inside whom this God is supposed to dwell. So Swami Vivekananda, steeped in the realization, was not God-centered alone, but was God in man-centered. And that is what makes Vivekananda most practical, sensible, adaptable, and acceptable. And that oneness which he got from the very beginning, he had lent it to all the aspects of his life. And it was this oneness that made him get identified with the whole nation. And that's why he could proudly say, I am one of the proudest Indian ever living. I am condensed India. Nobody had this positive audacity or the positive arrogance to tell that I am condensed India. So much of love and so much of oneness, identification with India, so much so that he went even to the extent of telling that if Britishers catch and shoot him, tomorrow India will be free. What daring words for a monk who has renounced the world to tell that my death will be the first nail in the coffin of Britishers, but they don't dare to do it because my death will run like wildfire throughout India and India will be free. And it was this oneness, tremendous power of oneness, identification with the whole universe and beings in the universe, that exploded on the audience when he appeared on the Chicago Parliament of Religions and addressed, my dear sisters and brothers of America. So people clapped for something which they knew not what. That is how the biographers of Swami Vivekananda has expressed this phenomenon, that mere words, the very beginning of the words, made 7,000 audience rise to their feet and give a standing ovation, clapping for 2 complete minutes. If you start clapping for 1 full minute, you will find it so tiresome. And Swami Vivekananda says there was a deafening applause of 2 full minutes. So much of power was packed, so much of love, affection, harmony, blessings, peace, love, and everything that is positive from India, it totally exuded from Swami Vivekananda and exploded on the audience who attended that beautiful speech at the Parliament of Religion, Chicago. So this oneness which he got from Sri Ramakrishna was one of the tremendous things that made him tell that the best way to serve India was love India. This is a tremendous alchemy, the Rasayana, Bhakti Rasayana, Desha Bhakti Rasayana, that once you start loving India, all other things take care of itself. We need not go on explaining step by step how to love India. Because the moment you love India, like mother loving a child, she knows what to do and when to do. If the child falls into the marshy place or onto the road or gets soiled, mother knows what to do. When the child is hungry, mother knows what to do. Similarly, if we start loving India, really loving India, and one can cultivate this love also, just as we cultivate the taste for cigarette or taste for coffee or tea, one can cultivate this love for India after listening to Swami Vivekananda, reading about him, speaking about the glories of our motherland, and slowly imbibing those extraordinary and ennobling thoughts into our own heart and mind. And slowly you will find the great love for India awakens in our own heart. That which was sleeping will be awakened by these electrifying words of Swamiji, which have got tremendous potential and power to awaken the inner feelings which are dormant in our own mind. So this touch of oneness which Swami Vivekananda got was what made him spell out this 2-word equation. This is 2-word mantra, love India. So we had seen how he got this touch at different stages, and the first time when he meets Sri Ramakrishna, that was a tremendous explosion in the consciousness of Swami Vivekananda, and it was simply impossible for him to digest that experience. And in the very first meeting, sitting in the radioactive spiritual presence of Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda both are called as radioactive spiritual personality. The place where they are, the whole spirituality automatically gets radiated, and in the very presence, Narendra's depths of consciousness was stirred, and the very first meeting he sings the song, "O mind, let us go back to our home proper." Why should we wander aimlessly in strangers' guise here in this foreign land of earth? So Sri Ramakrishna was wondering. So as Narendra finished singing, Sri Ramakrishna asked him, "My boy, do you see a light in between your eyebrows when you go to sleep?" Narendra asked, "Why? Don't others see light before they go to sleep?" Sri Ramakrishna smiled and muttered, "Aha, everything is tallying." By birth, Narendra was a Dhyana Siddha, an adept in meditation. And then Ramakrishna suddenly became emotional, grasped Narendra's hand, and with great flush in his eyes and on his face, Sri Ramakrishna, with folded hands, told him, "Oh Lord, you have come so late." This is a beautiful scene in the life of Ramakrishna Vivekananda. The two great souls, the symphony of the universal melody, as Romola puts it, spiritual melody, they come and meet in one of the most enchanting way. And Sri Ramakrishna, with folded hands, he told, "Oh Prabhu," what a lovely word it is. Lord himself is telling and calling this young boy, "Oh Prabhu, oh Lord, You have come so late. How unkind of you to keep me waiting so long. My ears are almost seared listening to the cheap talk of worldly people. How I have been yearning to unburden my mind to one person who will understand my thought. Then with folded hands, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, Lord, I know you are that ancient sage Nara, the incarnation of Narayana, the one among the venerable 7 sages, the Saptarishi Mandala, born on earth to remove the miseries of mankind. Narendranath, the young lad, began to brood and wonder within himself, what is this strange and queer thing happening? I am the son of Vishwanatha Datta, but this man calling me Rishi, Narayana, etc. So the doubt crossed Vivekananda's mind, is this man a man whose mind has gone out of control? Is he out of his mind? Anything has got loose in his mind? In future, talking about Sri Ramakrishna in his famous lecture, My Master, that was one of the masterpieces of Swami Vivekananda's oratorical skill, Swami Vivekananda would remark how he first felt that his master was mad in the very first meeting, and then remembering that incident, he says, people called him mad. Alas, it is from such madness comes the power that moved the world in the past. And it will be from such madness that the power will come that will move the world in future. So what first appeared to be madness, it later transformed itself and metamorphosed itself and appeared as something most unusual and spectacular. Sri Ramakrishna then returned to his room and fed Narendranath sweets with his own hands. The supreme touch of the Master's grace, God feeding the devotee with his own hands. Normally, devotee offers Naivedya to God, but here the whole case is getting reversed. God is offering Naivedya to Narendra with his own hands. With that blessings entering into the body and the mind of Narendra, the fire is set burning, and the quest for God takes the shape of a bonfire like a conflagration, and the whole soul of Narendra is set afire with the thirst for God like a man gone mad. And the whole fire of God seeking starts burning fiercely inside this young man from the most modern city of India, Kolkata. Sri Ramakrishna and Narendranath then returned back to the room and they start talking. Narendra then asked Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa the question that was very dear and which was kept as a secret and one of the most expensive thing in his heart. Sir, have you seen or experienced God? This time when Narendra asked the question, Sri Ramakrishna replied in a very positive and in a confirming way without any hesitation. The same question Swami Vivekananda, then Narendranath, had asked Devendranath Tagore, who was the father of Rabindranath Tagore. Meeting him in a boat and finding him alone, Narendranath, the young lad, once asked, Sir, have you seen God? And Devendranath Tagore smilingly told, My boy, you have the eyes of a yogi. And Narendranath started getting puzzled. I asked him a question whether he has seen God, and this great man is describing about the beauties of my eyes. Who bothers about his own eyes? I want to see the beauty of God. Sir, have you seen God? The answer from Devendranath Tagore, praising the beauty of Narendra's eyes, left him little puzzled, and in a way he came astonished, finding that his question has not been answered. But first time in his life, as he met Sri Ramakrishna and asked this question, Sri Ramakrishna, in a spontaneous way, burst out with the answer, Yes, I have seen God. I see Him as I see you here, only more clearly. God can be seen, my boy. One can talk to Him, but who cares for God? People shed torrents of tears for their wives, children, wealth, and property, but whoever weeps for the vision of God? If one cries sincerely for God, one can surely see Him. The great benedictory touch of the Master fell on young India in the representative Narendranath, whose birthday, 12th January, has been declared as the National Youth Day. The whole of Indian youth has been given a life avenue, the goal of life, through Narendranath, and that benevolent and benedictory touch of Ramakrishna falls on the Indian youth, and that is why you find in India there is a bursting of young men taking to monastic life or living in the house trying to lead a spiritual life. That is how the touch of the Satchidananda comes to Indian youth, first through Narendranath, and through Narendra, many of the youngsters, boys and girls, have now taken to spiritual life. Swami Vivekananda was so impressed with this meeting that he started visiting Ramakrishna daily, and he felt, oh, religion could be given. One touch, one glance can change a whole life. Sajjana sangati kshanamapi eka bhavati bhavarnava tarane nauka. Touch of the saint, even for a second, can transform the whole life and make you cross the ocean of this life. Shankaracharya says, Satsangatve nissangatvam, nissangatve nischala tat chittam, nischala chitte jivan mukti. This is the touch. The whole of India abounds with the story of such touch. One touch to the dacoit Ratnakar by Narada Maharishi. He becomes Ratnakar, becomes the great Valmiki Maharishi, who writes Ramayana, which is being recited by whole of Kerala during the Karkada Masa. So what a powerful spiritual touch. The whole India is gifted constantly with saints giving this touch to India, and therefore the light of spirituality, the lamp of spirituality, is constantly burning in India. And Swamiji says, what has India been doing for the last 5,000 years except producing saints and sages? So this tremendous spiritual touch Narendra got through his master and ultimately his beloved. So much he was impressed that he felt the mesmerizing effect, and first time in his life he could feel that religion could be given Karakamala Amalaki Vat, like a Amalaki fruit, myrobalan, in the palm of one's hand. One can get spirituality, and that is the most demonstrative evidence for a science. Spirituality can be given just as you take an article or a material from one place and hand it over to another person. Narendra felt amazed as this was the first time he was meeting someone who could say that he had met, seen, and experienced God. He also understood that those were not mere words, but words uttered from the deep inner experiences. He left Dakshineshwar and came back to Calcutta in a highly puzzled and bewildered state of mind. He was astounded and surprised as to how Sri Ramakrishna, whom he is meeting for the first time, could know that he is seeing a light in between his eyebrows before going to sleep. How could Sri Ramakrishna understand this innermost secret? Indicating that the whole of universe is an open book for the master to read. And this gave a great shock to the most scientific and inquiring mind of Narendra, that something tremendous has happened in the depth of his unconsciousness. He was bewildered as to how Sri Ramakrishna, whom he is meeting for the first time, could know he is seeing a light before he goes to sleep. And how did he make that Narendra is interested in meditating and is involved in it? Slowly the doors of the unknown, uncharted areas of spirituality started opening for Narendranath. This touch, the touch of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna Sparsham, this was what the great fortune India had got, the Ramakrishna touch. There are hundreds of incidents where we can describe how in the lives of common man, the touch of Ramakrishna Vivekananda has given a transforming effect even now among many of the rulers, many of the actors, many of the sports stars, many of the monks, many of the doctors, and the different citizens belonging to the different faculties of life. They can narrate the story of the Ramakrishna touch, which we will see if we get an opportunity. This touch left an indelible impression in the mind of Narendranath, for it was the touch of that transcendental Satchidananda which took the shape of a divine child and at first touched Narendranath, who was one among the 7 venerable sages. So this left such an effect that Narendra felt that he must come again, study and experiment and explore what this tremendous phenomenon is. This phenomenon called Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Romarola says Ramakrishna Paramahamsa is a phenomenon in spirituality. Narendra was a highly intelligent, scientific mind and was considering it all madness and wanted to come out of the situation. He responded positively to the request of Sri Ramakrishna to come again, and that all alone. Though at heart he was deciding quite the opposite. But being a gentleman and to keep the promise, he finally went to meet Sri Ramakrishna for the second time on a weekday. This is the second time Narendranath is going to meet. In the last meeting, though he was puzzled and a little shocked and thought whether Ramakrishna was out of his mind, Narendra felt a great sense of purity, renunciation and attraction for Sri Ramakrishna, and he had given a half promise that he would try to come. And he was so enamored and attracted that he wanted to know something about God, the question which was burning in his heart. And therefore, here he found a man who could answer and quench his thirst. And therefore, on another weekday, Narendra reached Dakshineshwar and directly went to the room of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna was self-engrossed and he was all alone sitting on the cot. The moment he saw Narendranath, Sri Ramakrishna became jubilant. He called Narendranath and made him sit on the cot near him. Narendra sat. Sri Ramakrishna suddenly went into a strange mood and was muttering something inaudibly, and intently he was looking at Narendranath, and slowly he came near Narendranath. And Narendra began to wonder, oh, like the other day, today also perhaps the mad one Ramakrishna Paramahamsa may behave in a queer way. Before Narendra could complete his thought and understand what is going to happen, Sri Ramakrishna suddenly placed his right foot on the Narendra's chest, and Narendra had a wonderful experience. His eyes were open and he saw something amazing happening in front of him. He started feeling unconscious, a sort of unconscious. He felt as if everything around him, the rooms, the walls, and the temple garden, his own ego, the eye sense, all were vanishing away into a great void. Narendra got scared and felt great death. He staring in front of him and in great surprise and shock cried out, "What are you doing to me? What are you doing to me? I have my parents, brothers and sisters at home." Hearing this, Sri Ramakrishna laughed and moved his foot away from the body of Narendranath. He touched the chest of Narendra, restored his consciousness and said, "Okay, all right, everything will happen in due time." The moment Sri Ramakrishna touched the chest of Narendra, the whole marvelous experience vanished, and Narendra regained his usual mental condition, and all the things like rooms, garden, and all the things which he experienced, his ego and the eye sense, looked as if they are all in right place as they were in the beginning. This is a tremendous experience in spiritual life. One of the most inexplicable mysteries in the adventures of spiritual life. A touch. Tremendous thing. It is the first time, maybe after the Vedantic rishis, one touch could change the consciousness and lift the mind of a man to higher and higher levels of experience. And again another touch and the whole mind comes back to normal field of experience. This was an enormous experience for Narendranath, who was totally riveted in the scientific way of thinking and scientific modes of inquiry. Swami Vivekananda, narrating this experience, says, the narration takes much more time than the whole experience took time to happen. Whatever I'm explaining, it takes this much time, but the whole experience of Ramakrishna touching me and the things vanishing from my eyes and me merging into the void took less time than the time it is taking for me to explain this experience. Now Narendranath became more puzzled and felt that Ramakrishna had hypnotized him. He felt a little disgusted as he apparently could not resist Ramakrishna from influencing him. It is a sort of affectionate, a sort of pride a child will have, because he was a man who had very, very strong and stubborn self-will, the ability to reason, the sense of logical thinking process in him. All this created a feeling of self-confidence, but for the moment the whole thing was shattered and a mere touch could make things happen, and Narendra was simply aghast with what has happened in his life. Deeply unsettled, as he used to boast of having a strong mind and willpower. It was strange, very enigmatic and puzzling. Narendra then remembered Shakespeare's dialogue in Hamlet. Horatio, there are more things in heaven and earth than that are dreamt of in your philosophy. Now Narendra's mind deeply pondered about this incident, but could not come to any conclusion or understanding, because it was beyond the purview of his understanding or intelligence. An extraordinary spiritual experience has exploded from the bottom of his own personality, and it took him unawares. But he decided that he would not again allow the madman to bring about such a change in him. But what is science in front of spirituality? Vivekananda says in one place, the modern scientific discoveries seems to be like the echoes of the ancient spiritual discoveries our rishis had made. Science is only dealing with the external world. Spirituality is dealing with the total world, internal and external. That is why it is called as Adhyatma Vidya, Sarva Vidya Pratishtita. So Narendra was pondering on this incident and he couldn't come to any conclusion. But he decided that he will be very, very careful and alert when he meets this old man Ramakrishna. Seemingly mad, but more and more you look at him, it seems he is not mad at all. But how could you call such a man mad, who in a moment's notice could pulverize and like a wet clay knead and give any shape to the mind of a man who has a strong willpower and strong resolution? He seemed to be mad, but then how to explain his purity, his innocence, tremendous renunciation, and this power exclusively? Narendra's mind was baffled. It couldn't get any answer. And after this incident, after touching Narendra, Sri Ramakrishna was totally different. He behaved with him like an ordinary, old, long friend meeting him again after a gap of many years. Sri Ramakrishna fed him, made fun with him, conversed with him, cut jokes with him, and in 100 different ways poured his heart's love on Narendranath. And still Sri Ramakrishna was not happy and content. And when Narendranath took leave, Sri Ramakrishna was stricken with deep grief, as if a very, very near, close person to the heart is leaving. This is one of the beautiful mysteries in the spiritual adventures of India, that God also does not want to part away from the devotee. It was Sri Ramakrishna, the God, who came with the messenger of God, Narendra, and first time when he met him, he felt after a long time he has come. Because after his God realization, Sri Ramakrishna had stood on the terrace of the Kali temple and weepingly shouted, "Where are you, oh my boy?" Sri Ramakrishna wanted to give all the spiritual wealth and the treasures and the experiences he had got, and he wanted to impart this to the young men of India, so the whole India will be again reborn with the spiritual vibration. The old India, which Vivekananda used to call in later years My India, the eternal India. And in one place he says the universities will be producing saints and sages. Yogis and sannyasis and masters will be walking down the streets like clerks and lawyers. This was the great vision with which this Sachidananda and this Narendranath and Sri Ramakrishna had come to this world as incarnation to revive spirituality in India. And slowly, in coming years, India will become the leading light of spirituality for the whole world. And as Narendranath took leave, there was great, irreparable grief in the heart of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna very cleverly then took a promise from Narendranath, please come and quickly. And once he gave the promise, then Sri Ramakrishna released Narendranath to go back to his house. Again the visit comes, the third visit. And these are all the beautiful things which we read in the life of Ramakrishna, how it is indirectly a sort of what you call a beautiful representation of God meeting the devotee, devotee again getting attracted to God, coming back, and then there is a separation, and again coming and joining, ultimately overpowered by the love of God, devotee and God becomes one. This is a beautiful mystical story of spiritual union that is happening between Narendranath and Sri Ramakrishna. To keep his promise, Narendranath comes third time to Sri Ramakrishna. He was eager to understand the stupendous power of Sri Ramakrishna's mind. He wanted to know more about him. Restless to meet all these things, he again came. But he was pre-planned again this time, and more resolved that he will not allow the things that happened in the earlier meetings, and he will be very, very alert and self-conscious. But the most unexpected thing happened this time also. God always springs surprises. Now also, whoever expected coronavirus will come, a mere simple virus, and the whole world is toppled down. Tremendous power of God. Simple virus and so much of technology and development, everything simply gets pounded down and it is nowhere. Everything is shattered. God is always the most unexpected thing in this universe. We can't expect God. He is the most unexpected, uncertain, and one of the most mystical, enigmatic, puzzling, and one of the greatest riddle in this world. That's why the happenings of the God are unpredictable and unexplainable. So Narendranath came to Dakshineshwar as per his promise, and there was much crowd in the room of Sri Ramakrishna this time. As Narendra came to the room, Sri Ramakrishna took Narendra to the nearby garden of Yadu Malik. Yadu Malik and his mother were great devotees of Sri Ramakrishna, and the gates of the house was always open to Sri Ramakrishna. As there was a great crowd, Sri Ramakrishna, who wanted to have conversation with Narendra alone, took him to the garden. In that garden, Sri Ramakrishna, with his hands holding Narendra's hand, started conversing about many things, and after some time sat on the bench in the room of Yadu Malik's house. Then suddenly Sri Ramakrishna entered into a deep ecstatic mood. Little away, Narendra was observing all these things happening to Sri Ramakrishna. At that time, suddenly in that ecstatic mood, before Narendra could control or come back to his own self, Sri Ramakrishna came near, and in spite of his all alertness of Narendra, Sri Ramakrishna touched him with that touch of indescribable power. Instantly Narendranath was overpowered and he lost himself, and this time, contrary to previous meetings, when he had some outer consciousness, Narendra was totally lost to the external world. After some time, as Narendra regained normal consciousness, he saw Sri Ramakrishna caressing the chest with a sweet smile. Narendra could not grasp what happened in such an electrifying way. The touch this time had brought a great transformation in the mental condition of Narendra. First time Narendra felt this man, whom he thought mad, is not mad, but he is the only sane person amongst all other mad people living in this world. All are mad after lust, gold, and selfishness, but this man is mad after God. Yet, this experience remained elusive and enigmatic, and Narendra was unable to capture and understand how this experience could come and go, as if one is putting on the switch of a light and switching off the light. Now, what Sri Ramakrishna thought about these things, let us see. Based on Sri Ramakrishna's words, Sri Ramakrishna had certain visions. Sri Ramakrishna saw that Narendra was a Saptarishi in the Saptarishi, one of the Saptarishi in the Saptarishi Mandala. Secondly, at the time of Narendra's birth, Sri Ramakrishna saw a ray of light coming from Kashi and coming to Kolkata and entering the house of Bhuvaneshwari Devi, who had prayed to Lord Veereshwara Shiva of Kashi. Sri Ramakrishna understood that this man from Saptarishi Mandal has taken birth, and he will definitely one day come to him at Dakshineshwar. With these backgrounds, Sri Ramakrishna could immediately spot Narendra in the very first meeting at Surendra's house when Narendranath sang that famous song, "Oh mind, let us go back to our own abode." Sri Ramakrishna had an exclusive power to understand a person merely by looking at his body, by looking at his limbs and actions and the way of breathing, etc. The eyes could clearly reveal to Sri Ramakrishna the disposition of a man's nature. In the second meeting, Sri Ramakrishna started imparting spiritual power, lifted Narendra to higher states of mind to get confirmation about these details as he just touched him. When Narendra started resisting, shouting, "What are you doing? I have my father and mother," Sri Ramakrishna just left him. A spiritual master guru, like mother hen, knows when the egg is ready to be hatched, and he waits when it is to be let out. When it is to be poked, the eggshell will crack and the chicken will come out. Similarly, the spiritual knowledge, how it is to be given in a very, very judicious way, the great masters, they know. And Sri Ramakrishna understood that the Maya covering, which he wanted Divine Mother to put on the mind of Narendranath, otherwise Narendranath as a small child would have gone away from this world, it has worked wonders, and Sri Ramakrishna believed that his prayer to Mother has come true when Narendranath shouted, "I have got my father and mother." Sri Ramakrishna felt that he had prayed to Divine Mother, Kali, to put some amount of attachment and Maya in the mind of Narendra, who was pure like Shukadeva. And now when he shouted, "I have got my parents at a house," Sri Ramakrishna smiled and understood that Divine Mother has answered his prayer. If Narendra does not stay in this world, it will be difficult to carry on the work of Divine Mother. And Sri Ramakrishna got satisfaction that little Maya has entered with this answer of Narendra. And on the third time when he touched him, he could take Narendra into the deepest recesses of his mind, and from there elicit all the information he wanted. And Sri Ramakrishna was satisfied to know that Narendra is the same Rishi whom he saw in the vision, and who has come to relieve mankind from misery and sorrow. In the third meeting, Sri Ramakrishna asked more questions about from where Narendra has come, why he was born to the earth, and how long he will live in this earth, and much more and many more things about Sri Narendranath. These informations confirmed to Sri Ramakrishna what he saw about Narendranath. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa felt that these matters should not be let out, and learned one important thing from these replies of Narendranath when he was put into a deep ecstatic mode, that these things, if relieved and if it is revealed, Narendra comes to know of it, he will not stay in this world even for a moment, and by strong resolution he will give up his body by the power of yoga. Narendra is an adept in meditation and a superman, and therefore these informations which Sri Ramakrishna gathered by putting Narendranath into the deepest moods of meditation, taking all this information from the depth of his consciousness, Sri Ramakrishna had told others that it should be kept as a secret, because once this is revealed and Narendra comes to know who he is, he will not stay in this world even for a moment. How beautiful it is, how scientific, how practical, sensible, and so intelligently Sri Ramakrishna is doing all these things. Though for all outer appearances, Sri Ramakrishna looked a simple man, a simpleton, and a madman, but was supremely intelligent beyond the understanding of the ordinary purview of human beings. Sri Ramakrishna's experiments were successful, but we are left amazed to find how technically perfect and how scientifically tuned the mind of Sri Ramakrishna was. More scientific than scientists, and what an awesome power he had to get things verified, the enormous power of the soul, the power of the spirit within. Sri Ramakrishna's experiments ended with these experiences and incidents, but then Vivekananda's experiments began with the masterly touch of the great master. This is the Siksha Sparsham, the learning touch and the touch of oneness, the Advaita Sparsham. In spite of all this, Narendra was overpowered by the unsullied love of Sri Ramakrishna and got admitted into the spiritual school of Sri Ramakrishna. The training in the school of spirituality began, but the Narendranath, the Kolkata young boy, endowed with keen intelligence and inquiring spirit, would not accept anything unless it is scientifically and logically proven and that fitted into his rigorous logic and reasoning. But most of the spiritual teachings are a matter of experience and cannot be contained within the walls of logic and our reasoning. Many experiences defy our logic and understanding. For that, our buddhi, the intellect, has to be made refined and made sharp, leading and enabling us to get pure perceptions. And there are matters which are beyond buddhi and reasoning. Advaita, which is the acme of spiritual knowledge, is one such experience. It is to be first heard, thought over, and meditated upon, culminating into final experience. However, we may talk about this non-duality or oneness of this universe, and it can be explained logically, it cannot be understood unless it is experienced. Advaita Vedanta, Advaita Jnana is a matter of experience. One experience, logic and reasoning becomes mute spectators. One's experience in our life, the so-called logic and reasoning, becomes mute spectators as you have had your own personal and first-hand experience. No books are required. Nobody is required. When you have a headache of your own, the very experience speaks to you about headache. You don't have to read about headache in books. You don't have to hear about headache or a doctor giving lecture about headache. You have the direct and first-hand experience. And this opening of the door to first-hand experience, Ramakrishna did to his disciple Narendranath. And then Sri Ramakrishna had the key with himself. As Sri Ramakrishna was training Narendra in the Advaita, so many difficulties came into the fore. One day, as Sri Ramakrishna was explaining the principles of Advaita Vedanta, Sri Ramakrishna gave him the experience of Advaita Vedanta. This was the second-hand experience. One has to experience it by oneself, but still Sri Ramakrishna gave him a taste of it, like a school teacher solving an arithmetic problem on the board. We do understand it, but then we have to again work out the arithmetic problem or algebra problem for us so that the intellect opens out and it becomes an experience gathered by one's own effort. One day, as Sri Ramakrishna was explaining the principles of Advaita Vedanta, Narendra was keenly listening. As Sri Ramakrishna finished his teachings, Narendra started talking with another devotee named Hazra. Can such a thing happen? That the pot is God, jug is God, this is God, that is God, everything is God. Oh, what a game! Oh, he's kidding. Asking like this, both Narendra and his friend Hazra started bursting into a roaring laughter. Both fell on the ground and they were laughing vigorously. Hearing the noise of Narendra laughing, Sri Ramakrishna, like a small child, gathering his clothes under the armpit, he came out smiling and asked, "What are you talking, my dear boy?" And just simply touched Narendranath and went into Samadhi. Marvelous, simply superb, spellbinding. It's hair-raising. What magnificent, what marvelous personality Sri Ramakrishna is, as if the whole of spirituality is continuously exploding inside the person of Sri Ramakrishna. And lo, dramatic transformation took place and a marvelous change took place as soon as Sri Ramakrishna touched Narendra, teasing about the Advaitic principles. Now let us hear about this experience in the words of Narendranath himself, who was so strong in body, strong in mind, strong in will, and strong in everything. Narendra says, "That day, the moment Gurudeva touched me, there was a great revolution in my mind. I immediately saw that there is nothing in this universe except God." Oh, what a beauty. I was waiting how long will this condition of my mind will exist. The whole day that the feeling that the whole universe is immersed in God, the feeling persisted. I returned home. Every time I turned, it was God penetrating and filling every place. Wherever I turned, whichever direction I saw, I found God interpenetrating and filling every space of this universe. I sat down to eat. Food, plate, person serving the food, me eating, and the food which I am eating, everything is nothing but God. After taking one or two mouthfuls of food, I sat spellbound and I remained stunned. "Why are you sitting like this?" my mom shouted. After hearing this from my mother, I again came back to my senses and I started eating again. Thus, in this way, while eating, resting, while going to college, and all the time the same scene persisted. A sort of strange and indescribable ecstatic mood took possession of me. I was walking in the street. Vehicles were coming and going, but like other times, I did not feel moving to the side of the road and felt that what the vehicle is, that I am also. Me and the vehicle are one and the same. My limbs seemed to be lifeless. There was no satisfaction in eating at all. It seemed as if someone else is eating. Sometimes while eating, I will lie down on the floor, will get up again, and again start eating. Sometimes I used to overeat, but it never caused any harm to me. But my mother got frightened and remarked, "It seems some dangerous disease has caught hold of you." Sometime she will say, "This time you are not going to be alive." What a tremendous thing has taken place. That is why for the modern generation of India, we have to go through this beautiful life history of Ramakrishna Vivekananda. Spirituality so tangible, so open, so revealed, and so close to us that Ramakrishna Vivekananda has kept this whole book of spirituality open for every one of us to read, understand, imbibe, and practice in our life, making God as the goal of our life. This is a spiritual touch Ramakrishna Vivekananda has given to our country, Bharat, which is the real seat of spirituality, and Vivekananda says spirituality is the backbone of India. After some times, in the words of Narendranath, as the experience became less, it looked as if this world is a dream. I was walking along the path of a pond, and there were fencing all around the pond. I used to dash my head against the railings and the fence, and there was no feeling in hands or head. I felt whether I have got paralysis or what. Like I could not get out of the intensity of that experience. I found the experience continued unstopped, and it lingered more and more like a jet lag. After some time, when I regained my usual consciousness, I felt that this must be the thing that is described as Advaitic state, Advaita Anubhava, and what the scriptures are telling are totally true and not false. After this, I could not doubt the tenets of Advaita. This is how the Samshaya Rakshasa Nasha Mahastram, as Sri Ramakrishna is described by Swami Vivekananda is the famous song Jaya Naradeva. The demon of suspicion, doubt, was totally destroyed by Sri Ramakrishna by a single touch. This is Guru of the supreme excellence. Just by a glance, just by a touch, just by a look or by a word, he could impart spirituality. Thus, the great touch of the great master Sri Ramakrishna, with his classical masterly spiritual touch, imparted the Advaitic experience, the feeling of oneness with the whole universe. And that touch of oneness with the universe led him to the feeling of oneness with our motherland, Bharata Mata, Bharata Varsha, and burst out in the form of an ecstatic song of Love India, Love India, Love India. Somebody will have to compose a beautiful music, a song on this word Love India. And from the depths of this oneness with the whole country came out the burning words, I am condensed India. I am the proudest Indian ever living. India is the cradle of my infancy, the pleasure garden of my youth, the sacred heaven, Varanasi of my old age. Oh brother, proudly proclaim that you are an Indian. All Indians are your flesh and blood. India's gods and goddesses are your own gods and goddesses. India's good is your good, and India's soil is your highest heaven. This is one of the most beautiful things that has happened to India, that an avatara has come and give this loving touch, the feeling of oneness with the country. This is called nationalism, Desha Bhakti, the touch of bhakti imparted by Swami Vivekananda, coming from the Saptarishi Mandala, from the transcendental realm of Satchidananda, oneness. And that percolated through the lectures of Swami Vivekananda. And in one of the lectures, he has conceived this idea of oneness, making the whole world a global village, tied with one single religion, allowing all religions to flourish under its umbrella, asking this question, can Vedanta become universal religion? What a beautiful statement, and what great expansive heart this has got. And all this can come only when we get the fiber of Indian spirit, the oneness. This oneness is the very base, the very pulse, the very breath, the very blood, the very flesh, and everything of India's soul. Advaita Vedanta is the very soul of India and Hinduism, and this must be taught to our children from the very birth. And that is how the whole of India glowed in the past. Bharata means one which is glowing. Bharata. Bha means great luminosity, effulgence, glowing. How did Bharata glow? Because the idea of oneness, which Ramakrishna imparted to Vivekananda through the acme of spiritual experience called Advaita Anubhava, which is the supreme experience of spirituality, expounded in all our scriptures and given as the mother feeds her breast milk to the children, it must be revived again. Every mother should teach the children that you are that, you are that, you are one with the whole universe. Why India alone? But to become one with the whole universe, first we must have the love for India. Love your mother. As you start loving your mother, you develop love for all the mothers. That is how first loving India slowly expands into love for all other countries, because the whole of Indian religion, whole of India's culture, whole of Indian ethos, everything is tied with one single beautiful divine thread called Advaita, non-duality. I am one with the whole universe. This is something magnificent and tremendous and a profound thing, which in the olden days, Indian mothers used to feed the children along with their breast milk. This is real education, real culture, and once this idea of oneness, which we in our language, in Swamiji's language, express as love India, Bharata Prema. If this gets into the blood corpuscles, like injecting the Covaxin, if this idea of Love India vaccine can be injected into the child's body, into the body of all Indians, nothing more is required to transform India. So take hold of this Love India formula, this Love India medicine, put it inside, and as it goes inside and becomes one with our personality, we will start radiating that love, and slowly it will work magic in our life and also in the life of the nation. First, the idea must sink inside. And as the idea sinks inside, it goes into the heart. It gets one with our emotions, get mixed up with our feelings. And from that emotion, when that emotion will give motion to our intelligence, because emotion gives motion to intelligence. We all have intelligence, but our intelligence is based on plurality. I am separate, you are separate. So I am selfish. When oneness, the feeling of oneness comes, this very same selfishness gets transformed into unselfishness. And this unselfishness is what Swami Vivekananda calls as God itself. Self-abnegation is God itself. And love is nothing but self-abnegation, giving up the selfishness. And when you want to love India, automatically the selfishness must go. It is selfishness in the most pure and expanded form that you feel for the whole country, and it is a great achievement. It is one of the most best qualification an Indian can get. Can you love India? You may be a doctor, you may be an MBBS, IAS, or whatever you may be, but have you got this qualification of loving India? This idea of loving India was taught from the very childhood, and I had told you in the previous classes how a mother was ready to die to give birth to a child who will be an asset to society, this great India. So this sacrificing oneself for the welfare of many is a tremendous feeling Indian spirituality is generating, and it comes from this magic formula, Advaita, non-duality. I am not separate from everybody, and therefore I cannot hate myself. I am India, and I have to love India because I cannot hate myself, I cannot hate India. Slowly, as the thoughts, words go into the ear, enter the brain, enter into the heart, gets merged with the feelings, the actions that come out of this refined, purified, and transformed feeling will give rise to that Love India song. Once that song, that is a real national anthem. That is the Desha Geetam, Rashtriya Geetam. So Vivekananda gave this idea of Love India Geetam for us, and through the Vivekananda Vedic Vision Foundation at Kodungalur, we are again taking this opportunity in a humble way, but in a positive and in an inspiring way, to put this idea into the air. Let the idea float into the air first, and slowly people will catch it. Like virus floating in the air, ideas must first float in the air. Idea brings revolution. Every revolution has idea behind it. Put this idea of Swami Vivekananda, let it vibrate throughout the atmosphere. Spread this more and more, and more we start chanting this mantra, love India, love India, love India. Before others love India, we will start loving India. And once we start opening up this beautiful lotus called Love India, our life gets changed, and that change brings change in the external world. May the fiery power, personality, preaching of Swami Vivekananda awaken this pure, refined, and spiritual power to love India. May the blessings of Swami Vivekananda be on all of us. May we get empowered with this mantra, Love India. Namaskaram. Thank you to one and all. And I thank Love India Forum of Kodungalur Vedic Vision for giving this beautiful time. It's a wonderful evening now.